William Moore Ferrar was an Australian writer and farmer in Tasmania. He was born in Dublin in 1823, the son of Edward Ferrar and Jane Moore. In 1840 he left Ireland for Sydney. After a few months he was invited by his relative Bassett Dixon to his home in Placia Ross, Tasmania. In 1847 he married Dixon's daughter, Elizabeth Charlotte Dixon, the pair having 9 children. For the first few years of his residence in Australia, he worked as a superintendent of prisoners. He died in 1906 at Ross, Tasmania. His first and only other work of fiction was The Dream of Ubertus, from the 1870s, having the same protagonist as his other novel, going to Sparta and dreaming that it was besieged by the majestic emperor, cut his scalp upon Blazo, and that he was instrumental in challenging him. In 1896 he published his only well-known work, Artabanzanus, The Demon of the Great Lake, an allegorical romance of Tasmania. The book is presented as a work of fiction, written by an extremely old man who came back to die in his ancestral home. After his death, he leaves behind the narrative of Oliver Ubertus, a poor Tasmanian who, while staying close to the Great Lake, has 2 very different fantastic experiences. First, as he is loitering about, he is taken by a magnificent ship to an even more magnificent city, full of tedious, boring perfection, realizing all too late that the person who brought him there was his departed father. Not being permitted to reveal his identity to his departed mother. Also there, he recites a long, tedious poem about Queen Victoria before being shoved back to shore. Sometime later, also while wandering around the same lake, he encounters Artabanzanus, the demon of the Great Lake and despot of the underground city of Pandapolis. Descending into the pit in a balloon powered by thunder, Ubertus is promised riches if he agrees to be the demon's secretary. He has quite a need for them, as one of his daughters, Bellagranda, has the tendency to make them her husbands and then turn them into dogs. The demon's daughters are in fact vicious women from history, such as Cleopatra. Also Bellagranda is really Clytemnestra, the wife and murderess of Agamemnon. We soon meet the only other notable character, Dr. Julius, the premier of Pandapolis. The doctor ministers to the demon's many daughters, and to the suffering of the other inhabitants. We sadly see very little of the city. We hear there is a quarter devoted to pleasure, and we see another devoted to having the shades of men punished by wearing rows of lead on their shoulders. There follows an extended scene where Ubertus is taken to the court of Henry VIII, whom Ferrar never calls by name for some reason, and after seeing several people beheaded, Ubertus almost suffers the same fate because the king will not believe trains are real. Then a stranger shows up, whose name we are, I assume, supposed to know, from the many allusions we get, who tells us a rambling story about his life and gambling addiction. This narrative takes a whole chapter, but is rather unenjoyable. The only gruesome scene per se is the demon ordering a parade of his army, 1,000,000 men strong, and holding many famous conquerors, but then the whole thing explodes into slaughter and carnage, and hundreds of thousands are mangled or killed, and even the demon's carriage is smashed to pieces. Sadly, much of the novel is given to speeches on politics, Ubertus decrying the idea of home rule for Ireland, and criticises the expenditure of the Tasmanian government. Bellagranda never shows up again beyond a brief cameo at the end, where she really did fall in love with Ubertus, though it has no bearing on anything. After more speechifying at the Pandapolis Parliament, and a duel with 2 of the punnily named ministers, bearing names such as Dashme Partigan and Lord Cashup on Buggings, we have Julius and Ubertus escape the demon, and we get the life story of Dr. Julius and his tragic love for his friend Helen, which is written as regular non-ironic fiction before the book ends. Overall a great disappointment.